You've probably heard the quote from Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics, which says, "What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning." So, how did Heisenberg develop this idea? He developed this idea in the context of quantum mechanics and the uncertainty principle, where measuring one property, like position for example, unavoidably disturbs another, like momentum. To observe an electron, you must interact with it. For example, by scattering of light. That's how you interact with it. And that very interaction changes what you're trying to measure. So the result of the measurement is not a neutral photograph of an independent object, but the outcome of a very specific experimental arrangement and interaction. What did he mean by method of questioning? So by method of questioning, Heisenberg means everything that goes into an observation. The experimental setup, the measuring devices, and the conceptual language in which we frame what counts as a position, momentum, wave, or particle. Different methods of questioning reveal different aspects of nature. An experiment built to show wave behavior, a wave-like experiment, let's call it that, which is interference, will not simultaneously reveal the particle traits. And an experiment built to show particle impacts will not show interference fringes. So Heisenberg and Bohr, who was his friend and another one of the great German pioneers, they both stress that especially at the quantum level, the observer is part of the situation, not a detached spectator standing outside of nature. The measuring apparatus built by us, human beings, becomes an integral part of the physical process, so method and object cannot be clearly separated. This breaks the classical picture in which nature has fully determinate properties, independent of whether or how we look. So Heisenberg also uses this to critique what is referred to these days as scientism, as opposed to science. What is science? Scientism is the belief that the scientific method yields a complete final picture of reality itself. If every scientific result is nature exposed to our method of questioning, then scientific knowledge is powerful but intrinsically partial and intuitive, existential. It may probe aspects of reality that a narrow, defined scientific question cannot register. I hope that's clear. If every scientific result is nature exposed to a method of questioning, then scientific knowledge is powerful but intrinsically partial and conditioned by our tools and frameworks. Other modes of understanding, philosophical, intuitive, existential, may probe aspects of reality that a narrowly defined scientific question cannot register. You can think of nature as a vast landscape and each experiment as a flashlight with a particular color filter. You never see the whole landscape at once. You see illuminated regions colored by the filter you choose. Change the filter or the angle and a different pattern emerges. So Heisenberg's point is that physics is the disciplined art of choosing and refining these flashlights while remembering that the light we see is never the landscape in itself, but the landscape as illuminated in that specific way. So when we blend these ideas, so Heisenberg, in a philosophical framework, then it becomes obvious that in quantum physics, to measure an electron is to interact with it. So what you get is not a pristine electron in itself, but the outcome of that specific experimental setup. That is Heisenberg's method of questioning. Bohr's complementarity sharpened this. Ask a wave question, interference setup, and you see wave-like behavior. Ask a particle question, detection at one slit, and you see particle-like behavior. And you cannot have both answers at once. Philosophically, of course, this echoes Immanuel Kant. We never access the noumenon, the thing in itself, but only the phenomena, the thing as it appears through our forms of intuition and categories. So Heisenberg explicitly states that physics is part of the interplay between nature and ourselves, and that science describes nature as exposed to a method of questioning, eroding the strict split between world and what we call I. Your instruments here, all instruments, but in this case measuring devices, are not only microscopes and detectors, but the nervous system, and also concepts, language, and the subtle, often unconscious intentions with which you meet experience. In that sense, what is this? What is this? What is this? It's never neutral. For most of you, this is a book. For others, this is paper with squiggles. That's a tree. That's an ecosystem. That's bugs, bees, the weather, stars, galaxies. So, when we see that what we experience is never actually fundamentally real, there are unconscious intentions with which we meet experience. Once we see that, then what is this becomes neutral. If the underlying question, for example, is this threat or safety, the world appears as a field of threats and safe zones, if the underlying question is that. If it is this useful, the same field appears as tools and obstacles. So a good example would be walk down the same street once as a photographer asking, where is the light? And once as a real estate investor asking, where is the value? The physical street is still the same, but what you observe, the world that becomes phenomenally real for you, differs dramatically because the method of questioning differs. Now, take this to my favorite level of existence, which is non-dual. Then those traditions say that the apparent world is always Maya, illusion, as interpreted. Once we interpret raw experience, we create illusion. Not sheer illumination, but appearance which is inseparable from the mode of knowing. So Heisenberg's remark in a modest way meets this. You never meet nature itself apart from the play of awareness and its question structures. In experience, this can be tasted whenever you notice that a solid problem often dissolves when the underlying question shifts from how do I fix this person to what is actually present in this moment. Nothing external changes, but the world disclosed is radically different. So you can say from a non-dual standpoint that the observer and the observed are two roles arising within one field of knowing. Quantum theory simply forced physics to admit that the cut between them is even empirically not absolute. The cut between what? The observer and the observed. So Bohr's language is also very beautifully expresses this when he says, we are both spectators and actors in the great drama of existence. Both spectators and actors. Both at the same time in this great drama of existence. And this parallels what we call modern understanding of perception and the world that we create is a construct, and that awareness is not outside the play, but it is the very substance in which both spectator and the world appear. This understanding can be turned to a direct practice in many ways. Notice, first, the implicit question. In any charged moment, ask yourself, what question is my system secretly asking right now? Often it is, am I safe? Am I enough? And the world is obligingly answering the question. Simply seeing the question loosens the grip. Also, when you experiment with changing the question in a tense conversation, shift from how do I win to what is true for both of us right now. Instead of arguing with me, but how do I win, prove you wrong, I am right, etc. Ask myself, what is true for both of us right now? And watch how the nature you observe, in nature means anything you observe, tone, body language, options, they reconfigure. Prior to questioning, in meditation, notice the micro movements of mind that classify, evaluate, and seek. Let there be a moment of bare sensing before any question arises. Sights, sounds, and bodily sensations as they are, without what does this mean for me? In that gap, the method of questioning temporarily recedes, and there's a taste, just a little taste of immediacy that non-dual traditions call closer to reality as suchness. Over time, this can reveal that your life has largely been nature exposed to your method of questioning, and that as the method relaxes, even briefly, what remains is a simple self-luminous presence in which both observed are movements, not two separate things. So this is reality as a question. Without the question, what is it? Infinite possibilities. So what we call reality ordinarily is that which is exposed to a method of questioning. Beyond that reality is the luminous presence in which observer and observed are movements, not two separate things.